Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, "The Time I Lost My Store About $1,000 to Stick It to My Boss." So this happened back around 2015, when I worked at our favorite office supply company that resembles a paper-stabbing paperclip. I was a pretty good employee. I worked in the tech section. I upsold the BS that they wanted us to upsell, and downsold the crap they wanted us to downsell. I had been there for a while, so I noticed some inefficiency in the procedures in the computer repair bench that I was working at, so I started modifying the procedures and our productivity improved a little. The managers didn't care, customers were happy that their computers were actually done on time. Everything was going smoothly except for this one guy in the morning shift. For no explained reason, he hated me. I flat out asked him once what his problem was, and he pretended that there was nothing wrong, etc. Well, we get a new manager, and I get my ass handed to me about how this guy didn't like how I was doing things because it wasn't per the manual. When I explained that it was because of me that our on-time numbers went up, she didn't care and told me to stick to the employee handbook. Cue my malicious compliance. Later that day, or the next, I noticed this husband and wife rolling to the cash register with a, if memory serves me right, a $1,000 printer. Now, employee training explicitly states that if a customer is going to make an unwise purchase, that you should coach them in finding the correct item. The logic behind that being that if they realize you help them save money, they'll be willing to return. So, I politely approached them, greeted them, and proudly watched the steam come out of my manager's ears when they happily walked out with a $35 printer instead. Hey, I'm just following the employee handbook. The boss never learned her lesson. I quit like a week later because I had to prepare for finals, and last I heard, the store went downhill from there. Next one is titled, "Get the Pendant Mum Wants." Wish granted. My mum loves Hershey Kisses. They're her absolute favorite candy. So much so one year mum was immediately in love with a specific pendant Macy's was selling. Think a beautiful half-inch tall white gold Hershey Kiss studded in teeny tiny diamonds. Mum wanted nothing else but that pendant for Christmas. Dad didn't want to buy it. It was pretty expensive. Then he saw in their magazine that they also sold a silver version that looked like it was made using the studded pendant as a mold. To be frank, it was ugly. A small Hershey Kiss that looked like it had silver eczema. But it was really $200 cheaper than the diamond version. Dad didn't want to go to the store to buy it. He hates crowds and Christmas shopping was his bane. He gave me, his newly 18-year-old daughter, his credit card and told me to go get the pendant. I knew which one he meant, but I clarified anyway. Me, oh, the Hershey Kiss one she really wants. Dad, yes, that one. You know what it looks like. Please buy it with my card for your mum. Me, Roger Dodger. So off I went to the store. When I got to the jewelry case, I saw both versions side by side, and remembering that Dad told me to get the pendant mum really wanted, immediately chose the better, more expensive one. Got it all prettily wrapped up and came home. Gave Dad his card back and he was none the wiser. Until Christmas morning came. When Mum unwrapped her present, she was nearly in tears. She was so happy. She told Dad she thought he'd get the cheaper one. Dad just kinda quietly muttered, "So did I." He confronted me about it later and asked why that one. I just smiled and said, "You told me to get the one Mum really wanted, so I did. Are you really gonna complain though? It is much prettier than the other one and she's very happy that you bought it for her." He just grumbled a bit about it and let it go. A few months later, Dad accidentally let slip to Mum that he wanted to get the cheaper one, but that I dubbed him by doing exactly what he said and not what he intended. My mum still laughs about it. She says to never give me the card again unless he's very specific about what he wants. She still wears that pendant every day 12 years later and laughs at the story every time. I think I made the right call. Edit, to answer a few questions I've seen in the comments regarding the extra $200. We had a super good year financially wise, and Dad had gotten a massive Christmas bonus from his boss for their really good year too. Would I do this same thing now? No. We decided now, since adulthood began, that if something Mum wanted was too expensive, we'd all chip in together to buy Mum's gift. Last year we all chipped in $100 each, including my aunt and my husband, to get my mum her first ever KitchenAid stand mixer. My mum doesn't get a lot of presents from my dad. Christmas is pretty much the only time of year he gets her something. Her birthday and their anniversary follow close behind Christmas. And very rarely does my mum ever want something quite so pricey. In the last 12 years mum has only ever wanted one thing more that was so expensive, see stand mixer above. She usually gets something small with sentimental values or appeals to her smaller love of things. Though one year Dad did save up all year long to get a couple's tattoo for the two of them for Christmas. Could he have been furious? Yes. But to be frank, at that point my dad also has two older daughters about 20 years older than me who were rambunctious in their teens. And since I never did things like going against his express instructions before, and this made mum's entire year, he could not keep angry at this particular purchase. He had planned on that extra bonus money to go toward mum anyway. Next one is titled, "Want us to warn each other whenever we might eat something unhealthy?" Okay. My boyfriend has it in his mind that I'm eating super unhealthily because I drink a protein shake after I work out and occasionally have a drink once a week. He's called me out on it multiple times about how too much protein is bad for your kidneys, and that I'm going to have renal trouble, and that I'm going to give myself heart disease by drinking. Despite pointing out that you need a massive amount of protein for that to be a thing, and that moderate alcohol consumption isn't unhealthy, he would not let up. So I asked if he wanted me to tell him whenever he was eating unhealthy foods, and he agreed. After all, it's not like he eats nearly as unhealthily as I do. So, we go for a drive and you want a candy bar for a snack? No can do, it's full of sugar and isn't really nutritious in any way. Granola bar? You mean a candy bar for people in denial? Why don't you have some fruit or a little snack pack with cheese, fruits, and crackers? No. Too bad, no snack then. You want some coffee? Sure, I'll get you some black iced coffee. Oh, you mean a Starbucks Frappuccino drink? You really want that much sugar, because that has more sugar and calories than my breakfast had. Why not water instead? No, you're good? Okay, if you say so. You want a burger for dinner? You just ate 2 fish fillet sandwiches for lunch, and had no veggies all day, and still asked for a candy bar afterwards. In fact, I think you just need a salad. How about I make you one since I'm making one for myself for dinner? No. Okay then. Want to order food out? Okay, I'll get some curry. What's that? It's too rich and full of fat and not enough veggies. You're right, I'll get a salad from another place. What's that? You want chicken and waffles with a side of mac and cheese? Maybe lighten up on the fried food. Why don't you share my salad? No. Okay then. Frozen veggies are bad for you. You're right, let's not eat frozen food anymore. Let me start by throwing away your dinner since it has frozen coconut shrimp on it. No. Okay then. I'm eating too much cheese. You're right, I'll stop having a bite from the 2 pounds cheddar block you asked me to buy. I'll just throw it out too since you won't be needing it either. What's that? Never mind. Okay then. What's that? You want a muscle milk after dinner? But what about all of that protein? Surely it can't be good for your kidneys? Needless to say, he doesn't bother me about the protein shakes and a weekly beer or wine anymore. I've also gotten him off candy bars and Starbucks drinks, and he's coming around on the fast food and veggies. Next one is titled, "Actually, this is exactly what you asked for." Have a story from work a few years ago. To set the scene, I work for a pretty large promotional product manufacturer. We mainly print temporary tattoos, but we print a lot of other products like pulp board coasters, stickers, and scratch and win cards, which are the product this story involves. My first year that I started working at the company, one of the largest distributors in the US asked for a quote on a pretty large scratch and win order. It was just a rough estimate as the total quantity was not set in stone by the end user. It would need to be drop-shipped to about 400 different destinations, and the quantities were into the hundreds of thousands if I remember correctly. There were 10 different cash prize amounts ranging from $5 to $100. Normally when we receive orders, we receive purchase orders that will show the total quantity of each layout from the company. However, the sales rep that I was dealing with sent me a spreadsheet with all 400-ish locations and how many of each prize layout needed to be shipped there with no total quantity at all on the spreadsheet. I asked the rep if a proper PO would be sent in, and he asked I consider the spreadsheet a PO. To get the order going, which I can do with his authorization, so I proceed. After the proofs are ready, I send them to the rep along with an order confirmation showing the total cost of the order and the cards that needed to be printed. He approved both the confirmation and proofs, so we pushed them into production and they shipped out the following week. About 2 weeks after everything delivered, I received a phone call from the president of sales of the distributor, who seemed extremely concerned with the order and making claims that we made a massive mistake that we would need to credit them for. I asked him what he believed the issue to be, and he told me that the end user had planned to pay about $750K in prize money total, but they had already cashed out about $500K, with a little over a third of the cards being redeemed, and that we would be responsible for any of the redemption money beyond the $750K. Me, using the little Excel knowledge I had at the time, used AutoSum to figure out that the spreadsheet they provided me with actually called for a total of almost $2 million in prize money. In the nicest way possible, I told him that the order that we received from them asked for a total of around $2 million, and because of that, we could not be held responsible for the excess. This dude absolutely lost his mind, telling me that I was wrong and that we messed up and we needed to make things right. Because I was not in the mood to fight with this man, I asked him for his email and forwarded him the email with the spreadsheet we were provided, along with the rep stating that the spreadsheet was how they were providing their order, and even a screenshot of the order's amounts while I was in the phone with him. He started freaking out a little more, said he would give us a call back regarding the matter, but that call never came and our company never received an email from the rep who provided that order again. Next one is titled, "I'll gladly receive disciplinary action in order to miss work for the holidays." I worked at a theme park. Company decided to enact a holiday attendance policy for Thanksgiving, basically saying, we reserve the right to deny your time off requests. If you call in, it's automatically a corrective action, and so on and so forth. Of course, my request gets denied despite the description being out of town vacation already booked, paid for. I made the conversation pretty blunt with my manager, letting him know that I would happily take corrective actions in order to not miss my trip. Luckily, he knew what was better for him, approved my time off request and found someone to cover the shifts I was assigned. I heard that so many people had time off denied that weekend, which resulted in a massive number of call-ins, subsequently forcing the park to shut down several rides. A common loophole people used to get out of work that weekend was simply forging a doctor's note, which makes you immune to any sort of attendance-related punishment in my state. The best part was that they had to lay off far more people than normal due to the policy. This would not have been the case if they hadn't tried changing the rules. This resulted in poor staffing for Christmas. The following year, the company did not enact the aforementioned holiday attendance policy. Next one is titled, "Don't Do Dishes." Okay. Back in 2019, I did an internship out of state. It was probably one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life. One of the good things about this internship is that housing was provided for anybody participating in the internship. Some downsides, however, included 1. Our roommates were randomized, meaning we were pretty much put in apartments with anybody doing this internship, and 2. The people who run these complexes were extremely strict on rules. On any given day throughout a majority of the internship, these people would inspect our apartment to make sure it was clean. Any sort of mess, even if we weren't the individuals who caused it, was written up. After 2 write-ups, we would have a meeting with the head of housing, and a 3rd time, we would be kicked out of housing, maybe even terminated from the internship. Luckily for me, it never went that far, but we were written up once, and that's when this story takes place. I was with 5 other roommates. The one roommate in this story is Emily. Emily seemed nice at first, but ended up being a total witch to me. She despised me for no reason whatsoever. I tried being nice to her, and tried doing as much as I could to make her happy, but it was never good enough for her. One such moment was a week where I had a week off from doing any chores. Our chores system was set up in a way where each week, 5 of us would do something different and 1 person would have a week off. Well, being off from working, I decided to just stay home and relax. When I went into the kitchen to grab something to eat, however, I noticed dishes stacked up and overflowing in the sink, all dirty and disgusting. I knew this wasn't good. The inspectors haven't been in our apartment in a hot while to inspect the apartment, so I knew they would come in any day to inspect it. I looked over at the fridge, where our chore chart was, to see who was doing dishes this week. Emily. Great. I sighed before deciding to grab the sponge and start scrubbing the dishes. Surely Emily wouldn't care if I washed the dishes for her. After all, she works just as hard as I do, right? This is one less thing for her to do, right? That's what I thought. But a couple minutes later, she came into the apartment in a huff and paused as she saw me doing the dishes. Emily, excuse me, you know that's not your job. Me, the dishes are piled up and really dirty, I thought I would do some. We might get inspected soon. Emily, I don't care. It's my week to do the dishes, not yours. Hands off. I dropped the dish I was working on in the sink and backed away before going back in my room. I was upset. She didn't need to act like that when I was trying to help her out. But then I thought now that she was home, she would probably do the dishes herself. After all, she said that was her job, right? Well, I went back out there and back into the kitchen to grab some food again, and she was nowhere to be seen. She and I share a room, and she never went in there, so she must have gone out again. That's what she usually does when she's not working. I stared at the pile of dishes, the urge to clean them was real. But I thought back to what she said, it was her week to clean it, not mine. So, my malicious compliance kicked in and I started making my lunch, adding one more plate to the pile in the sink before going back to my room. Later on that afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. Inspection. Oh boy, here we go. I headed out of my room and went up to the front of the apartment. I greeted them and led them inside, where they immediately started inspecting everything. Like I said, they meant business. One of the inspectors immediately paused as she came into the kitchen and saw the mess of plates in the sink. She gave me a stern look. Inspector, care to explain to me why the dishes are like that? Me, casually, well, I tried to clean the dishes earlier, but another roommate, Emily last name, got mad at me for what's supposed to be her job. The inspector wrote that all down. I knew this meant we would all most likely get in trouble, but it felt so satisfying knowing that this would come back and bite Emily in the butt. The inspector continued looking through the kitchen, finding nothing else wrong, and the other inspector came out finding nothing wrong as well. The dishes were the only problem. Despite that, the inspectors still gave us a slip with our room number on it that said we had failed inspection and that we would be written up before leaving. Later on that night, my other roommates returned home, noticing the write-up slip. They started panicking. Some of them got mad at me for not doing the dishes, while one roommate thought what I did was hilarious. Finally, Emily came back home. As soon as she saw the write-up slip, of course she took her anger out on me. But it seemed as though something clicked and she realized the argument she had with me earlier and she caved. She finally went and did the dishes. Of course, I asked her if she needed help and she pushed me away. About 2 days later, the same inspectors from before came back to inspect the apartment a second time. I wasn't there to see it, but one of our roommates was there and said we passed inspection that time. We were still bummed for being written up the first time, but that thankfully didn't happen again during my internship. Next one is titled, Do you want me to be productive on paper or do you want actual work documented? An old job started taking on quarterly goals. At first they were reasonable. Then they got ridiculous and even contradicted with each other. Example, we work on call 24/7 but most work is to be done Monday to Friday 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. On-site response time contracts depending on the site were written in 4, 8, and 24 hours. So depending on when a call came in, it could be evening or weekend overtime. So our metrics were we had to have 98% response times met, no more than 4 hours of overtime in a week, as well as many other things. So you can see how responding to an after-hours call can rack up overtime, especially if it's several hours away. Also, pushing the call off to the next day would hurt my response time. So I focused on making my response time as that was a contractual agreement with our customers and making my customer satisfaction goals. Overtime wasn't something I would worry about since it benefited me. Well, my manager started cracking down on me. Said I needed to reduce my overtime. I asked him how. He didn't know but stated other techs are making all of their goals, so I should too. So I straight up asked him, "Do you want me to look good on paper, or do you want me to do the job as it's written and get accurate metrics?" He told me that he didn't care how I did it, but I need to make all of my goals because I'm making him look bad. That's fine, I can do that. I started closing calls early, opening bogus tickets on other equipment to account for my time. Changing customer contacts to those who favor me in surveys. My overtime was reduced, but I didn't actually work more either. So at least my timesheet was factual. Customers started to realize I wouldn't come at night or the weekends. I even trained many to repair things themselves or not call something until normal business hours. Too many calls during the day lead to increased third-party utilization too. We had to make those on-site response times. So to make my goals, I gave up my cheaper overtime to charge the company more expensive third-party contractors. All to make my numbers look good. All while customers didn't get what they paid for in service commitment response. Sadly, the only fallout from this was my manager getting in trouble for his third-party budget, which didn't last long. Last one is titled, "Let's Reinvent the Wheel." Okay, boss. I worked as a full-stack developer in a startup company. The company had a client that requested a website that will only be up for 3 days and with live streaming. Our CEO quickly saw the opportunity and briefed us that everything here will be reused for all future clients that needs the same feature. Just for info, I was hired with the job description of creating APIs, dashboards and whatnot. Typically more on database and API integration for non-IT people. Basically you automate the usage of other companies' product. So as someone who has no idea how to implement a live streaming and someone who has every idea how to implement an API, I quickly looked for companies that offers live streaming APIs. I found Wowzer and Vimeo, and suggested them both. This CEO also saw something before that meeting about a company that creates its own products, instead of outsourcing it, and later on sells it. He fancies this idea, so he threw my suggestion and was like, "Why can't we do this?" And I was like, "Because we're a 10-man team with only mobile developers and web developers. We don't even have a tester at this point." Long story short, he really loved that idea and made us create our own live streaming platform. I made sure that he understands that none of us are qualified to do that. I'm the most senior web developer in that company, and everything we'll do is something we learned 2 nights ago. So the reinvention of the wheel is now a go. I managed to learn a bit about it and successfully made a working prototype. By my calculation, it would cost P20,000 Philippine currency for the amount of expected users on the expected live streaming time on a 720 resolution. Using a much higher one would cost more. Note that this is almost same as 1-year subscription to Vimeo. So we launched the product. Imagine a car that was built using 30 different models from 30 different manufacturers joined by glue gun and duct tape, and my boss thought it's nice to give some perks to our first customer for this product. So he allowed using the live streaming server for double the time and quadruples the resolution. And you guessed it, we basically had a server bill 3 times what it would cost for a year of subscription at Vimeo. Plus, that's only for several hours of usage. Edit, after that trial, he decided to purchase a 1-year subscription to Vimeo. Thanks for listening.